Live from our Lakeview studio in the Windy City. Welcome to the Chicago Python main meeting. My name is Ali Sivji. I'm one of the organizers of Chicago Python. I'm going to be your host for tonight's event. Let me share my screen and we will get started. Do I have speaker's notes? 1 second, just make sure I got all my stuff. There we go. All right, so before we do get started, I want to make everybody aware of our code of conduct. There is more information on our website. What is ChiPy? ChiPy, or the Chicago Python Usergroup, is a Python-focused community that was started back in 2003. We've grown from being a group that used to fit into small meeting rooms or into the back of a bar to being one of the largest Python communities in the world. We have over 6,100 members on Meetup. ChiPy would not be possible without a lot of fantastic organizers. I do want to take some time just to recognize our board members. A little bit about some of the things that we do. We have monthly project nights. Those have been more traditionally for in-person events, but we're trying to figure a way to make them transition into more of a virtual type of event. We also have a buddy mentorship program. If you go to chipymentor.org, you can find out more details there. And we have a Python lunch break. So yeah, that website again is chipymentor.org. You can go there and find out all people in our community that are wanting to be mentored or are looking for mentees. So yeah, if you're in any of those camps, check it out and hope you find somebody and hope you find what you're looking for. We also recently released a jobs board. Here we have we have sponsors from our community just sharing jobs that they have. This has been one of the most, I've got like 3 of my last 4 jobs through ChiPy. So I think like these kind of organizations, these kind of networking opportunities are fantastic. We can't really do them in person anymore, but we have created a job board to have that space available. On top of our monthly meeting, which happens on the second Thursday of every month, we have special interest groups that focus in on more niche areas of Python. We have one focused in on finance. Chicago's a big finance hub. We also have one focused on data. There's one for web development / DevOps. And we have a very active algorithms and data structure special interest group. I just want to give a shout out, or just shout outs for some upcoming events. Next Wednesday, or the coming Wednesday, we're going to have our last ChiPy meeting of the year. And this is going to be on property-based API testing. We have Dimitri Daigallo, who created this fantastic library called Schema Thesis. And what this library does is it takes your OpenAPI schema and it generates property-based tests using hypothesis. So you can find all of your edge cases. This is an awesome library. Dimitri's done a really great job. I'm really excited to see sort of how to use it more in a real life situation. And then in January, we have our AlgoSig on the 7th, and then we're going to have our next main meeting on January 14th. We are looking for speakers for events next year. So if you are interested, like comment in the YouTube or reach out on Slack. We would love to have you speak at our events. Where can you find us? We have a lot of conversations on our fantastic Slack workspace. There's over 2,000 folks talking about things related to both ChiPy as well as the wider Python ecosystem. I don't know if folks around are doing Advent of Code. That's the Advent calendar of programming challenges. We have a channel specifically for that, and it's been a lot of fun for the past 10 days. We are also on Twitter. If you go to @ChicagoPython, give us a follow. You'll find out what's going on in terms of upcoming events. And all this information, plus a lot more, is available on our website, which is chipy.org. We have two fantastic talks tonight. The first talk is by Ray Berg. It's going to be a little bit more of a meta talk, talking about taking a look inside of ChiPy and the types of things that we do. And then we have James, Talish, and Binbin talking about image processing using Python, a Raspberry Pi, and Nvidia's Jetson Nano. Sounds pretty awesome. You're probably seeing some comments in the chat on the, I want to say, left side over there. If you do have questions for our speakers, or you do want to interact with other members of our community that are watching this live stream, please feel free to do that over there. And just be aware that anytime you're interacting in a ChiPy space, you have to abide by the rules of our code of conduct. Well, that's it for me. Probably should not take that over there. I want to hide this screen. It's a little bit better. I want to bring Ray Berg onto the screen. Hey, Ray, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, Sibji. How's it going for you?
I am pretty good. I cannot complain. The year's almost over. I don't know what's happening. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from our Uptown studio, which is a whole different part of Chicago. Not that far apart, but
yeah,
sure
we're a couple miles away, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you?
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Can you introduce yourself to our audience, or introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, hi, I'm Ray. I am probably maybe surprising to some folks, but I'm the chair of the board for ChiPy. I have been for this last year and up through March of next year. In addition, I've been a member of ChiPy for quite some time and an organizer for, 7 years, something like that. Some period of time that's longer than 3. So, yeah. And in addition to that, I'm a software developer. I work for a financial company here in the city.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into Python?
Yeah, I specifically remember it. I went to grad school, sort of focused on security stuff, and I had a class where we had to write a lexer and a parser, some compiler stuff early on, and I remember the teacher said, like, do it in whatever language you want, but we should probably do it in C++. And I was like, I've heard about Python, and I really want to get into it. And so I wrote my first... it was a compiler that wrote compilers, actually, in Python, and been using it ever since. I absolutely fell in love with it.
Awesome. What's one of your favorite things of the Python language? Like, I mean, we all love Python, but what makes you like Python so much?
So I work with a lot of Rubyists, and one of my favorite things to bring up to them is that I love how explicit Python is without being encumbering. When you look around for where something is defined in a Ruby app, you're looking all over. You're trying to figure out how the code works, and it takes sort of it feels like it takes a degree in arcane magic or something like that to figure out how Ruby works. Python is very clear, very clean, and easy to understand without gaining the overhead of something like Java or some of the more like maybe nuanced parts of functional programming languages.
Yeah. I mean, if you have to do it in one line, that's great. But do you really need to do it in one line?
Gosh, I hope not.
Yeah. I will say that I wish Python had question marks so you can have like is true, or is whatever is like a Boolean name.
Yeah, that is a fun one of the fun features of Ruby. Blocks are also really cool, and RSpec is absolutely astounding. If anyone's ever heard of it, if they're looking in the Ruby land, RSpec will blow your mind with how sort of beautiful and terrifying it is.
Yeah, for sure. But we're all sort of dealing with the effects of sheltering in place. Can you talk a little bit about like your experience and how you've been handling the past, is it 9 months now? Wow.
Wow. I suddenly felt the weight of reality on my shoulders. I think it's been tough in different ways. I've been able to sneak some social interaction. I consider myself a fairly strong extrovert. So I've been trying to like fill in gaps with certain remote activities and been able to sneak a couple of in-person things in parks and things like that. But actually, the funny thing is, when COVID started, I said, I don't like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think, but I think I'd like to be a dungeon master. So I've been every week since COVID started running a Dungeons and Dragons game, which is probably the nerdiest thing I've ever done and super fun and a great excuse to hang out with friends. So there are some glimmers of hope in all of this.
Are you doing it through like an app or is it like a computer program?
Yeah, well, we use a cool piece of actually Node technology to kind of run the game, but we play it over a call kind of like this one, and we just we play together, and mostly it's an excuse to just sit and have fun and make up stories together.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's it for all my questions. Are you ready to get started with your talk?
Sure, why not?
Ray Berg, please take it away.
I'm going to resize this just a little bit. I thought I had perfectly. There we go. Yeah, so the talk is really, I liked what Sivji said. It's a meta talk. It's intended to be a sort of an explanation, a deep dive, kind of what Sivji went through in the beginning of the announcements that we cover every week. I think you guys hear about stuff, and you probably encounter, for the folks that are on the call right now, you encounter different parts of ChiPy, and I think it's hard to get a whole picture of sort of what it is and why it exists and how it fits with other things within the Python community. I'm really proud of the time that I've spent with ChiPy, and I'm proud of the organization that it's sort of it's really flourished into, and especially proud of all the awesome stuff during COVID. So I really want to make sure everybody knows what's happening in it. There's one other reason, which is why we talked about it as a board, and we talked about wanting to do it now, which is we're about to start the first the first re-election of the board. So it's a great time sort of to get invested in or to understand where ChiPy is. Last year we held our first sort of broad elections to get folks on board, and this year we are going to continue that process and sort of codify it and try to improve on it. So hopefully this will give you a picture of what ChiPy is, help you understand sort of where you've been plugging in so far, and maybe think about where you'd like to be plugging in the future, if there are things that you didn't know that we did, or things that you were like, oh, I had no idea it worked that way. So to understand it, I thought it would be helpful to draw a really terrible maybe diagram, but a diagram of where we fit into the to the world itself. So ChiPy is one of many user communities that is kind of sprouted up democratically throughout the world. I just listed a couple of ones here: Boston Python, SF Python, and the Puget Sound Python are some other ones in the United States, but there are user groups from all over the world that get together and do things just like what we're doing here today. They're awesome. We've had such cool conversations, especially at PyCon, the annual conference that happens via the Python Software Foundation. We get to come together and talk to other organizers and groups and sort of talk about energy and things that are happening. In addition to those, like just sort of regional based groups, there's also PyLadies, which is an organization expressly created to try to help underrepresented populations in tech get the support that they need. And so there's PyLadies Chicago, which we partner with. You've probably seen a couple of our PyLadies co-sponsored events. All of these groups are doing awesome work, and PyLadies, as you can see, is I like this map that they've put together, where it just shows the sheer volume and diversity geographically of what's happening at the PyLadies organization. But I imagine that PyLadies is probably the most active international arm of the Python community. But there are other groups as well that are sort of springing up throughout. So all of these groups operate within, I like to say this, informally or formally under the auspices of the Python Software Foundation. We are not part of the Python Software Foundation in ChiPy. We've talked about it before. There are a lot of groups that are. A lot of the ones that I'm mentioning here are part of the Python Software Foundation, or the PSF. But we are not. But we couldn't exist without them. They are hugely supportive of our work indirectly. And other groups they are directly supporting. They help them with budgets. They help them with 501c3 status. They help them with spending, all sorts of things. And PyLadies is a group that was set up underneath the PSF and gets support directly from them. So this whole ecosystem that we're a part of is really enabled by the PSF directly. And that's the group that is responsible for the core language maintenance, is responsible for community development, and working groups that are tackling all sorts of issues in Python. So this is where we fit. We are one of many, but we're pretty special. We there are quite a few things that we do. We do have a focus. We have a specific set of goals and objectives. We have, in the last few years, put together a vision, mission, and values statement, which sort of outlines how we see the world and our role in it. And I'm really proud of this work that the board has done to try to codify the things that we care about and the things that we want to focus on. And they're the reasons why that we're able to go out and get involved and be active in the groups that we're active in. I'm not going to read this directly. I encourage you to check it out. But it's really neat. It's a neat part of who we are. We are focused in Chicago. We are all about Chicago. We want to enable Chicago growth. But in doing so, I think we've been helping in a lot of other places. One example of that is when we go to conferences like PyCon, ChiPy has a really strong voice. We have a booth that we set up there, along with only a few other user groups. A few other organizations have standing booths at PyCon. So people from all over the world will come and ask us, what are you doing? What are you working on? How are you running your programs? What can we do? Can we take things from you? And we say, yes, please do. Please take as much as you can from us and do it better than we can. So it's a really cool organization just for that alone. But I tell you, the implementation is a lot cooler. And the implementation is detailed with another diagram here. Our organization, I've tried to think about it in trying to prep for this talk in how we relate and how we operate and what are the big rocks that sort of drive us. I think most folks know that ChiPy gets its money from sponsors. Our corporate sponsors mostly based in Chicago, but some are abroad. Elsewhere in the United States, that is. That funds a fund that's managed by the board to direct the organizers to go and do activities. And so the activities are varied, and we'll get into each one specifically. But a lot of those activities come with partners that will help us to reach new groups that we've never reached before, or to show us things that we didn't know were possible. And there's some really cool things we've been able to do as a result. This is actually not that comprehensive. There are other smaller initiatives that happen throughout, but these are the main core, the components that drive how we work together. And what I'm going to do is over the next, 15 minutes, I'm going to cover sort of what each of these things are and how they're broken out. So I want to focus first on the events that we run, and then I want to focus on the services that we provide. And then we'll talk about the team and how the actual organization works, just so you get a sense for how that happens. But I think in order to understand how to get involved or how to be active, you need to understand what we're doing and why. So I gave you a little bit of the why, and now let's dig into the how. So this event is the first one, and it's probably the easiest one to understand. It is our main program. We actually adopted that name. I forget if Sibji, you'll have to remind me. I think a year and a half ago. It's very fitting for our being a Python organization. I've always thought of this as our big keynote, sort of central, like open talks, big talks that sort of make you think, and it will reach almost everybody. There are definitely talks that we give that are in depth or focused, but the speakers who come and give talks will try to have a focus on our entire community. You can see the sort of draw we get with the talks we give. At these events. During COVID, it changes depending on the topic or depending on the week. But in person, it is very reliably, 80 to 140 people will show up to our free events. Part of that is because we offer, pizza and beverages and things like that. But it's really because of the community and because of the rallying point of these awesome talks. So this is where we've done mentorship finals. When we ran the mentorship program, this is where we had some really big name speakers. We have some really fantastic events. And the format is what you're seeing now, right? It's an introduction. It's usually some networking time before or after. Now we have to do them after virtually in ChiPytown. Which is actually pretty cool. It's a little bit different. Wish we could be in person, but this is a pretty responsible way of doing that. And then it's a set of talks, usually 2 or 3 talks, depending on the length of time. And they're on any number of topics from what are the enabling technologies I need to do my job, all the way up to an in-depth review of some research that's being done. We have a lot of awesome universities. We have a lot of awesome technology centers here in Chicago. We have incubators and other groups. So we're able to draw on a lot of that talent to get really awesome speakers. It's something that's very easy to be proud of. But it's a lot of work, right? We have to go to those organizations. We have to go to those groups. We have to reach out and try to figure out what is our talk schedule going to look like, who's going to be coming in, and how do we engage the full scope of our group, right? How do we engage a diverse set of speakers, a diverse audience, and should try to do that responsibly as advocates for a positive impact in tech, not just a tech talk group, right? It's very easy, I think, to get simple talks, but the work specifically done by Joe and Sivji to really pull in awesome speakers that focus on talks that are great. It makes it easy, and I get to benefit from it because you get to think that I'm going to give you a really great talk, right? So the next thing after our main events are every second Thursday, by the way. The special interest groups are these sort of focused areas, and they were one of the early breakoffs of the main because we realized that while it was good to get together in person, sometimes we wanted to get to a level of depth we weren't able to get to in that focused, all-together keynote style focus. And so what we did was we broadened our horizons as what are the general areas that people really want to dig in on. So one of those areas is algorithms and data science, or sorry, I didn't mean to say data science there, but data science is one of them. But algorithms, data structures, computational theory, all of the stuff that sort of encompasses this area that a lot of folks don't necessarily have access to. In terms of like when they're coming into Python, they don't necessarily come from the place where they're like digging in at the level of how do you I'm trying to think of a good example. Doubly linked lists, what are efficient ways, and algorithmic complexity measures to assess whether or not an algorithm is correct, right? Like those kind of levels of that level of topic isn't really appropriate for a group like this, but the group of people who really want to focus on it can get together and really drive in and say, okay, how do we solve this problem? How do we do it together? And that feeds things like applying to jobs you didn't think you were able to apply to before. So there are different SIGs. Sivji talked about each of them. We are very reliably now doing the lunch break SIG and the algo SIG. But we also have like rotating speakers and events for the web devs, web dev DevOps, the data, and the finance SIGs, as well as other sort of special interest topics. So again, the main is keynote, high level, regular, it's like clockwork. And then these ones come in and really let us focus on a specific area or technology or other I don't know, paradigm. I'm not sure what the word would be. And this even happens today, right? So this is, I think, a recent screenshot from one of our algorithm SIGs where they're trying to solve a cheapest price. It's basically doing a little graph theory. And the people are working together. You can see all the cursors active on the screen. These folks are working together to solve problems together. And that's the kind of thing that you can't really get at scale, which you would have at a big event. So really cool that we're seeing this happen still in remote times where we can't be in person. One of those environments that we tend to see a lot of collaboration and teamwork and team building and camaraderie is the project night. These have been traditionally hosted at the Braintree offices in the Merchandise Mart. They've been there for, I'm trying to think. Let's see, over 5 years. I'm trying to think if it's 6 years or if it's longer than that. And this is once a month. This group would get together and provide a problem to the group or let people work independently on problems and just get the experience of being together with a bunch of like-minded folks who are trying to solve and learn on, like, hone their Python chops. So we get together, we sign teams, or people just break up and find interesting groups to hang out with, and they get to work. This is a lot very similar to our Shy Hack Night sort of format where folks are getting together and sort of self-organizing and try to find ways to approach problems. But in the last 2 years, we've added this like focused problem-solving approach. It's kind of like the algorithm SIG, but for a general problem. Maybe it's a data science problem or a web scraping problem, where folks will get together, use some technologies they've never used before, solve a problem as a group in a mob programming environment, and then talk about it, figure out what the right solutions were, because there's usually more than one, and talk about where people had trouble. So in the very bottom right, you can see, I'm not sure if it's very obvious, but there's a little screen there for at ChiPy where we've been able to create or recreate a similar environment where there are different breakout rooms and groups can get together and work on this sort of collaborative problem solving without being in person in office. As we have mentioned before, and we'll continue to mention, all of this stuff is really enabled by our code of conduct, which was revamped in, I think, July of 2017. So I think that's right. It might be 2018. These years are running together. Oh, July 2018. It's on the slide. Ray, read the slide. Um, in 2018, we really put some time and energy into figuring out what did folks need to see in our code of conduct to make them feel safe and make them feel included, and be able to be comfortable in our setups. And so we really called out awesome behavior that we wanted to see, and we called out negative behavior we really don't want to see. In addition to that, we added sort of an ironclad process to go through and to get to deal with issues that come up. And for anyone who's been in communities, not just Python, any community at all, it's hard. It's hard for people to get together and to solve things if they come from different backgrounds, because there are a lot of unspoken things in communication and other places. And it's really important that we set a standard, which is, this is the kind of behavior that we want to have here. We want to have open and inclusive behavior and language. And as a result, we need to have a pretty bad process to make people feel like if something goes wrong or if there's an issue that comes up, they can talk it out and they can get to a resolution that they appreciate. So far, we've had some pretty good results, I think, in like both advertising and responding to incidents, which is cool. And we hope that, we never have to respond to an incident again. It'd be great. But we do have a process in place and are very keen to ensure that folks are feeling safe, that know how the process works, they know what's involved in being a part of ChiPy, and they know what's expected of them. And as of yet, I don't think we've seen anything that has been other than great, like good news coming out of this prop being in place. So looking for always feedback and ways to improve on our events. The code of conduct is one of those places that if folks see it'd be nice to see this in the way that we handle events or things like that, we're always looking for help. So with that, we sort of talk about the big events that we do. Again, that's the main talks, it's the project night, and it's the special interest groups that happen throughout the month. So now I want to talk a little bit about services. Some will remember that we had a mentorship program that ran, I think, 7 semesters, like 7 cohorts, something around there. I might be off. But what we found out happens is that took up like maybe 50% of our volunteer time to keep that program alive. And so Zach specifically worked on figuring out how we could get mentorship to be more of an everyday activity. Well, the timing couldn't have been better because COVID happened, and we couldn't do the things that we normally do with the mentorship program. If we had done mentorship in the spring of this year, we would have done 2 months, and then the program would have had to stop. So now we've moved to this online model where people can pair up with each other. They can look for folks that have interests or skills in areas that they are looking to get skilled up, and they can request a mentor. And vice versa, somebody can say, hey, I'm willing to mentor somebody else. And this program and the mentorship program before it have been really awesome ways for folks to get engaged, to get to know more about ChiPy, but specifically to build this network of paying it forward here in Chicago. Excuse me. The idea is, if you look at our organizers, I think you'll see this is true. If you provide people resources for them to get trained up and to feel a part of the group, then not only are they going to be better at their jobs, they're going to go out and find another Python job, they're going to go do whatever they need to do, but additionally, they're going to be more invested in our organization. And additionally, the person doing the mentoring is going to be better equipped to do it again. And not just in our program, but everywhere. So people who have come in and been great ChiPy mentors year after year are reliably amazing senior engineers because they're able to give awesome feedback. They're able to direct and motivate folks to try to get them to work on a project. In general, this has always been focused on the problems of an individual. So somebody comes in and they say, I want to learn more about airflow, as an example. They can go and find somebody who knows about airflow and say, this is what I'd like to learn about. They work together to find a project or a problem they want to solve together. They figure out the time period they want to commit to. They work on it together, or they have a system for making sure that the learner is advancing in that, and then they commit to it. It's really cool. I think I have 2 requests that I need to go check. So you get notified if you're a mentee or our mentor. You get notified if you have a request saying, hey, I'd like to be your mentee, and you buddy up, and then you can go off and do your learning, which is cool. This is just one of the great offerings. I really recommend checking it out. If you can just take 5 minutes and go set up a mentor profile, I think you'll see quickly that there are people in Chicagoland that you could help out at any skill level. If you know how to write a for loop, there are people who want to know how to write for loops. It's just the reality of learning. So in addition to that, we also have a jobs program. The jobs program, we partner with all of our sponsors for direct sponsorship and other things, but they also will post sponsor posts. This is a screenshot from today. They time out after 60 days, I think. But this is a recent one posted 3 to 3 days ago for an API developer. And people are able to post here. And then as a result of the jobs, like somebody being selected, the employer agrees to send us money, depending on the level of salary they're giving to the person hired. So this is one way that like employers can reach out to individuals, and a way that can get hired and ChiPy can get funded, right, to keep our sponsorships going. So this one's ongoing, active. It's constant. You can go to the website today and check it out. If you're an employer, please do post jobs. We've got an amazing, talented pool of 1,200 to 1,600 people that you could reach out to through our environment. The next one is just sort of what I call our collaboration platform. And here you'll see Sivji, you mentioned advent of code, and if nothing, Sivji is a great marketer, because you'll notice he's reliably communicating the advent of code, which is awesome. So when you're working on things or working in an environment, you can Slack there on the left, where people are getting promotions, or we're talking to our community, we're directly engaging with them, we're advertising upcoming events, and people are self-organizing and communicating over Slack. There are rooms for web dev. There's room for DevOps. There's a game room where people post interesting things. I just saw a cool Humble Bundle in there that I can't remember. I think I need to still go today, see if I can get it. But there's some really cool stuff that's getting shared on that Slack environment. We also on the bottom right have this new tool called ChiPy, which is just a domain pointed at Gather. And a cool tool that's used to do sort of remote events, shared events together. So this is a new technology for us, but we also have an old technology, which is our mailing lists. Again, this is provided by the PSF. PSF gives us this mail serve that we can use for cataloging email correspondence and things like that. And you can see how old ChiPy is by going back and looking at the archives. But the mailing list has been around for a long time and still is a way that people can reach out and ask for help or broadcast something. I think that's it for the collaboration platform. There are other ways that people will interact. Obviously, the YouTube experience that we have. So as regards that, we've got about 350 subscribers last time I looked. We've got over 100 videos going back to 2017. I think we have more in an offline archive. It does take time to do some of those in-person recordings. One of the perks of being remote like this is that we can directly stream and then directly put the content up online, which is really cool, right? That saves us the time of having to get the video stuff meshed together and then doing this picture-in-picture thing, right? It's a lot of work, but it's worth it because we're seeing some really awesome results from our videos. The top video that we have, it's actually another Ray has the top video, and Sivji has the second top video. So they're kind of in competition. Every couple of months, I feel like they switch back and forth between those two top talks. But we've got all sorts of talks and a lot of our old mentorship program finals on there as well. Really cool stuff. And the number of talks you can actually see is much higher than 100. I think it's over 200 if you talk about the individual talks that are happening within a video. We've broken out some of the earlier videos, but that, again, takes a lot of work. So, and who does that work? Well, it's our team that does that work. And I think I did a lot of thinking on this specifically, which was when you think about what the ChiPy as an organization is entirely volunteer based. We don't have any paid staff. I'm trying to think if anyone's actually gotten a reward for for volunteering, and there are rewards that are indirect, but the reason why people tend to volunteer, I think, is that they're a little goofy. And the way that they're goofy is very specific. They're goofy because they really like the idea of having a community around their work. They're goofy because they think that by doing work, you feel like you're a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And they're goofy because they keep doing it. Right? Like all of us keep doing it. And I think that's really cool. It's a great group of people. There are a few groups that I belong to in Chicago, and ChiPy specifically is one where I've immediately met vibrant folks that have become lifelong friends. And so that's why our team exists. Our team exists because we are happy to do the work together. And now I want to talk about sort of how we divide ourselves as we do that work. So the first thing is, I talked about the board. I'm on the board. What is the board? So the board is a 7-person organization that's responsible for that oversight function I talked about at the beginning. And it's just the individuals that get together and meet twice a month and talk through and vote on how we spend our money. How do we do outreach? What decisions need to get made? They collaborate on all aspects of how do we direct this group of volunteers to do the next big thing. This is very common structure. It works in many different places, but I don't think we do anything terrifically special on the board side. We are a bunch of volunteers and we get together. It's not actually that much work to be on the board because you really have to come to these 2 meetings and you have to be prepared to talk at those meetings. I don't know where the S and F came from. I think that's and maybe. But yeah, these are the qualifications. It's not much. You have to be in Chicagoland for most of or part of the year, right? You have to be able to attend events in person, and you have to have attended in the last 12 months. So if you can do those things, then you can be on the board. I'll talk a little bit. The nomination process comes from the organizers, and we'll talk a little bit about who they are. But that's it. The board it's a very straightforward thing. There are specific roles in the board, like president, secretary, and treasurer. And each of those things have specific sort of legal responsibilities and obligations. The president and the treasurer have access to the bank accounts. The secretary keeps the minutes that are our official record. So if we ever have to go to court or something like that, right, we would have that person say, no, on this day we talked about this thing and this is what we did. So those are the key roles that we have. But beyond that, it's a collaborative, shared group. We manage all of the web resources, all the passwords, access control. We just make sure that the organization can run smoothly. We provide the environment wherein people can be successful. And that group is this group. We're a fun bunch. You can see the name of the board members there. I think Sivji had this on one of his slides in the beginning. I wanted to call out, these are the 3 terms that are ending. They're each 1-year terms. Our goal is to have half the board rotate off or be reelected at any point. I know that Adam and I are both going to be off after this year, so there's definitely 2 openings on the board going into next year. But this is the group. It's seven individuals who sort of are responsible for each of these things, 3 of whom have those chair or officer roles. And you should get to know every one of them. They're all fantastic. Except for the guy on the bottom right. So an organizer, we talked about this sponsor, and I have this slide here again. So the board is on top, and really it's small. It doesn't do all that much work. It really helps with the organizers. And the organizers are really more people. It includes a lot of the board members are also organizers. But an organizer is simply put anybody who helps host or put on an event within the last year. And the organizers are basically managed by the board. If the board says, yep, you're an organizer because you've done this thing in the year, then you're an organizer. It's just as simple as that. This year, because of COVID, we actually had a unanimous board vote that said we're going to waive that requirement for this year because this year has been tough for folks to volunteer remotely. But the type of volunteering is so varied that folks are doing this work, as you can see from all the events that we're putting on. There are sponsor managers. There are MCs. Sivji and Joe both do a great job of that. Talk planners. There's, everything that goes into what we do is done by volunteers. So there are tons and tons and tons of roles and different ways to get involved. We have the Web Guild that's actively doing development on the website. Lots of different opportunities for folks to get involved with their skills. And And yeah, each of these functions has roles for people to just help, just be there to be supportive and come up with cool ideas. So who are these folks? Well, if you go to the website, scroll all the way to the bottom, which you don't get a lot of celebrity here, folks. So you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's an organizers link, and you can see all the organizers that have agreed to put their information up. This is not the whole list. There's an additional probably 15. We're still working on this. The first time we've made this list public, but we're working on trying to figure out what's the right level of visibility for these folks. We want the ChiPy community to know who's voting on and who can nominate people for the board, without having to like say my social security number is and my, my last 5 addresses are. So some folks are opting in for web links and email links, but you can reach out to these folks. You can ask them questions and you can do whatever you need to do. And if you'd like to be an organizer or a board member, you can reach out to any of them and they'll all be willing to help out. I know for a fact. So this is a very small list, so you can absolutely go to the site. Don't need to feel the need to squint or zoom in. It's thoroughly available online with clickable links and everything like that. So I mentioned that we're coming up on the end of the year, and we're coming up on elections. What does that look like? Well, on Monday at our board meeting, we're going to finalize the list of organizers for the year. And this will be everybody who can vote. It'll be everybody on that list, plus I think maybe 10 more people that we haven't gotten a hold of. So that list is going to be finalized. I think in January is when we're going to do the call for nominations for the board. And then in February will be the voting. That organizer list is the group that votes. If you volunteered, you can vote and determine who's on the board. And in March, I'm going to step down, and anybody who's not elected will step down. I think there will be, like I said, 3 openings with one person running again. That new board will start in March, and it'll go till next March. Why is it in March? It just is. There's no good reason. But it is really important. If you are not on this list and you think you should be, if you think you've met the criteria, you should reach out. Reach out to us and let us know. The goal is we want to get everybody who's actively involved in the community to be choosing who's making financial decisions, who has access to passwords and things like that. That's the group that we want to have. We want to make sure that group is wide and broad and can express their opinions. So aside from getting involved as an organizer and making sure that your voice is heard in the elections, there are lots of other things you can do. I've talked about a lot of them today, but if you're out there and you're like saying, hey, this sounds great, this group sounds awesome, they're all volunteer, I can't believe it, how are they all volunteer? We are, and you can help us by helping fund our events. We love volunteering, but in addition to volunteering, we do not want to subsidize the cost of this group. It's too much money for us to take on individually. So hire from our job board. Apply to the job board, like via the job board. Tell people that ChiPy sent you, that you heard about our sponsors, our awesome sponsors from us. Hire from the pool of organizers. There are awesome developers on the Web Guild. There are awesome folks who are working on sponsors and talks and doing emceeing and things like that. A lot of these folks are in great positions and they don't want to go anywhere, but it doesn't hurt to get a call and say, hey, I hear you're involved in ChiPy. I'd love for you to come join our team. Because I'll tell you, having worked with these folks, they're amazing folks. Talk to your employer about sponsoring, or like post-COVID, we could talk about hosting. And then beyond that, get involved, possibly give money directly if you can. But volunteering is really where it's at. If I can encourage you to do anything, just come and hang out. Come and be a volunteer. Join the Web Guild. Join the SIGs. Join the planning. Get a speaker. It doesn't take too much to be very helpful. With that, I'm done. You feel free to reach out on Slack. I'm Ray, R-A-Y. It's not too hard there. But also I'll be hanging out at the ChiPy Town hangout afterwards. I'd love to talk to people about volunteering and getting engaged in ChiPy. That's all I've got. If there are questions, I'd love to hear them.
Awesome. Can we please give Ray a round of applause in the chat? I'm going to do it at home, and I'm going to put it also in the chat. Got some emojis going on. So if you do have questions, please ask them in the chat. But until we're waiting for that to come in, can you talk a little bit about, say I'm trying to get involved, like what's the best way to do so? Like what is my next step?
What I find is the best thing is to go to an event and to like this after party today in ChiPy is a great way, because you're just going to meet people and you're going to see the organizers there. People will be identified with their names. Just say, hey, I'm interested in doing this. Here's what I have. Sivji, I know both you and I, like if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I have this skill, how can I use that to help ChiPy? We go, here you go. I got an avenue. I've got an idea for you. Yeah. Also reach out on Slack. Don't expect a response the same day. Slack is asynchronous, but just send a direct message. It's just say hi and tell us who you are and what you're interested in.
And just be aware that once you start volunteering, we're going to pull you in and do as much as you can. Like, it's a really good way to get involved and sort of start finding out like I didn't really know too much about Python or what I really wanted to do with the Python language, but helping organize ChiPy opened a lot of doors for me and helped me sort of figure out like what next steps are. So definitely a really good way to get involved and to advance your career.
I had that experience too. I went to a couple of meetup events and met people at my current employer, and it's like, oh wow, this seems like a cool place to work. So from an employer standpoint, or from trying to get cool people to work on your team, come to events and get engaged. I know so many of our organizers have like, I said, there's no reward to being a member of ChiPy or to doing this stuff, but I think you and I have both experienced the upside of that, which is people get to know who you are. You get to network with people from all over the world. It's really fun and it's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk a little bit about some of the success stories of like folks you've like mentored or like volunteers that ChiPy has helped out, just so other people get a sense of what can actually happen?
Yeah, we during the mentorship program, we had people who were not employed doing like things like data science or back-end development, and they would go through the mentorship program and possibly with something else, like maybe they had gone to classes or something like that, they would pivot that because they got some recognition by giving a talk. Bam, they got a job in the industry in Chicago. And obviously this can't happen for everybody. It doesn't happen all the time, but I want to say, if I were to guess, I would say there's 30 people I know who have done mentorship with ChiPy who have gotten full-time jobs that weren't doing it before, which is awesome. And I think other people who are just, they're improving and they're upping their skills so they can get promoted on their current job or doing something else. So I think the numbers are very high. I'm trying to think of other specifics. Like I don't think the hard thing about telling other people's stories is that I'm always worried that I'm going to say something. I see Adam is one of our board members just posted. I'll just read something he said. There is a huge reward. I've learned plenty and met lots of great people through volunteering with ChiPy over the years. I gave my first ever talk here back in 2012. Yeah, I very much echo those sentiments.
Yeah. And he went on from speaking at ChiPy to speaking at venues like PyGotham, PyBay, and like PyCon Australia. So like starting from here is a fantastic place to go. And I think that's one of the best things about Python is just like the community. And I know we all want to focus on a very large scale, but all the things are really happening locally. And it's awesome just to see like the amount of participation. Like I'm just really proud of our community. Like we've been meeting throughout COVID, and honestly, without this community, I would be in a lot worse mental state. So I sort of just want to thank everybody out there for sort of just being there for me and sort of giving us a venue to share what's going on in Python with all of y'all.
And because I know he won't say it, because he's the MC and he doesn't ever say it. Sivji has been behind most of the stuff you're seeing on the YouTube stuff. Not everybody volunteers at the same level, and Sivji really sets the bar for going above and beyond and really putting together awesome content. I mean, if you're enjoying the stuff that you're seeing, really like claps out for Sivji for all the hard work he does.
Thanks, Ray. I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of fantastic people in the community. Happy to share those folks' knowledge with all y'all. But before we let you go and bring on our next set of speakers, do you have any calls to action for our community?
Yeah, I think if you're not, even if you think like, okay, ChiPy, I like ChiPy, I don't want to do ChiPy, or that's not the place for me, now is the time, I think, for people with tech skills or people with any skills to do awesome stuff in the communities that we support. Chicago's got some really awesome grassroots initiatives that are really worth looking at. There's big groups like the Chicago Food Depository, but My Block, My Hood, My City, Jamal Cole's great organization is doing awesome stuff. I think it's no better time for nerds and Pythonistas to go out and get engaged. It's awesome. I think like we're definitely a place to do volunteering, but there are lots of cool places. Don't think that this is where it stops.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ray. It was a lot of fun learning more about ChiPy.
Awesome.
All right, we'll see you later.
See ya.
All right, so that was Ray Berg talking a little bit about what ChiPy is and the types of things that we do. A little bit of a meta talk, if you will, to end 2020 and go into elections in 2021. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll have our next set of speakers. They're going to be talking about image processing with Python, Raspberry Pis, and Jetson Nanos. Stay tuned. All right, we're back. My name is Ali Sivji. I'm your host for tonight's Chicago Python main meeting. We just had our first speaker, Ray Berg, talk a little bit about the ChiPy organization and how y'all can get involved. We have elections coming up in a few months or I think in a couple months for folks on the board. So just wanted to make everybody aware and try to increase the size of our organizer pool. Next up, we're going to have James, Tulish, and Binman. I'm just going to bring them onto the stream. Welcome, y'all. How y'all doing?
Hi, good.
Hello, everyone.
Can y'all introduce yourself to our audience? James, can you start? You're muted right now. Okay, so Binbin, do you want to start?
Yeah, hi. My name is Binbin. I work for EGDA in the last year. And I'm a software engineer as my profession. I don't use Python as much in the last year, but I have used Python pretty extensively throughout my college career. Yeah, and that's a good intro about me, I guess.
Awesome. Tulish, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a marketer and a data scientist. I have 3 graduate degrees from UIC, and I recently finished my master's in data science. Python was actually the very first programming language I learned in my life. I'm actually a pro management student, so I really transitioned from a hardcore functional area to the technical side of the business. So yeah, I think Python has really impacted my life and has given me a lot of power in making some really interesting marketing decisions. And I use it a lot for data sciencey stuff, writing machine learning algorithms for all sorts of predictive analytics.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's lead to the next question. Like, how did you get into Python? Like, you're not coming from that. Like, you're coming from a different background. So how
Absolutely.
What's that story?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting story. So I was working with an Indian broadcasting media giant called Subtelevision Group. And I was working with an intern, and I asked him, can you, go onto Google and search for the top 50 Bollywood blockbuster movies that have come out in the last 1 year. And I thought that he'll take a couple of days to, research and come up with all the results. That guy literally wrote a piece of code and got me the results in 10 minutes. And I was like, how did you do this? He's like, I knew some Python stuff. I web scraped it. I was like, okay, this is some interestingly, hilariously powerful tool that I really need to get into. And I was just 22 at that time. So I was like, okay, this is something impressive. I need to look into this. And then I never looked back.
Awesome. Binbin, how did you first get into Python?
Yeah, the story basically goes like this. I studied aerospace engineering at IIT, a local college. And I attended this class called a CS for Engineers, which focuses on MATLAB. First year, I paid the license fee, which was $75. Second year, I realized that in the middle of my homework, they cut off my license. And I was not too into just paying again, so I went to Python because their matplotlib was told to be like a pretty good alternative, and that's kind of how I had my first big deep dive into using Python.
Awesome. Yeah, I spent a lot of sleepless nights in a computer lab working on MATLAB type like problems. Really wished I had Python back in those days.
Yeah.
Jim, do you want to share a little bit about how you got into Python? I think you're still muted.
Yeah, you're still muted, man.
Jim, you're muted.
I cannot unmute your mic.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, cool, yeah. You know what? I was very skeptical of Python early on. But for image processing, it's just like the de rigueur, so we used it. And I guess actually, and Tulish and Linda don't know this, but it's a lot of fun as a story. My first foray into Python was, I was working with a bunch of medical professionals, and we got all this data, and we basically wanted to see it the same way every time. And I came to a point where I was like, well, we don't need a service that queries the database and just presents the information. We should just pre-process it so that when you request that information, it's already been analyzed and produced as an HTML page. And so that was my first intro to Python, was just like to do this like very broad set of processing tasks so that when a hospital person came to it, they just get that information right away. And, you know, I fell in love with it. I mean, it's a weird language, but it's a lovely language.
Awesome. So we are all experiencing sort of the results of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Can you all talk a little bit about how y'all been dealing with COVID-19 and like what you've been doing to cope?
Well, I don't let these guys go. They're all over.
All right, I would love to answer that.
Tim, do you want to use your mic?
Yeah, I didn't hear the question because of the mic. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let me just.
Would it be possible for you to get like earbuds just so we don't have that echo?
Well, usually I call in from my phone, and I tried that, but your setup wouldn't let me actually use a phone. So anyway, I'm gonna pop my mic off so you guys can talk.
Okay, awesome. So the question was like, we're all sort of dealing with the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic. We're sort of feeling the effects of sheltering in place and social distancing. How have y'all dealt with sort of being isolated and having to, I guess, like work from home and things like that? Binbin, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, as a software company, remote has kind of always been one of the most important things, or fairly easy for us to do. We all use standard tools that you might be familiar with, like Slack, Google Meets. You know, when we need to collaborate, we have a GitHub or Jira. So it hasn't been much of a difference in our workflow at all, outside of the occasional coffee talk that I do miss.
Yeah, for sure. Talish, how have you been dealing?
Oh yeah, I think work from home has really presented some interesting arguments, especially for the fact that do you really even need an office anymore, right? You can get 90% of your tasks done apart from, you know, some whiteboarding stuff, but, you know, you can still do it, right? For me, it was not really that much of a big transition because I just graduated in the middle of a pandemic, and that's when I just started working with Ekta. So for me, it was, you know, straight up remote right after grad school. Not much of a difference. Mm-hmm. Adapt and move forward.
Yeah, for sure. It's sort of like the new normal. I don't know when, like Chicago Python is going to be going back to in-person events, but it doesn't really seem like it's going to be anytime in like the next few months.
Right.
That's a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like that's it for all my questions. Are you all ready to start the presentation?
Yeah, sure.
I am not quite sure of the order. We didn't really get a chance to sort of go through that.
Yeah.
So if you can click on the bottom to share your screen, and we can just go from there.
Sure. I will pull up the slides. Okay. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
I see a PowerPoint window. Yep. Looks good. Please take it away.
Yes. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
It's a little bit of an echo.
No, it's still.
So like if you have like earbuds, that would really help out, like reduce that echo.
Yeah, I'll try. I don't have earbuds. Usually I just use like a cell phone. And there's not like a decent call-in number. So, but, and we've spent a lot of time on the call with other stuff. So I'm going to have to drop in 25 minutes. So I'm going to let Talish go. And if I can figure out a way to like screen share some cool code, then I will.
Okay, sounds good. Please take it away.
Cool. So ever since the COVID-19 lockdown began in the US, the focus of business enterprises and public facilities has suddenly shifted from, taking care of service to actually keeping people safe from the virus. And that's particularly a little bit tricky because the guidelines from the CDC are really simple, right? You social distance, you wear masks, but although these concepts are straightforward, demonstrating compliance with these concepts is relatively really hard, and that's what businesses are really struggling with, because human negligence can severely hinder public safety. What we've really realized through our work with Aegis is that there was a significant tool out there that could just provide real-time analytics or actionable intelligence around mask wearing violations, social distancing violations out there in the industry. So at Acta, what we did is we put together a nice team of interns, and we brought all the brains onto the table and just came up with a very low cost, accessible, all-in-one security surveillance product that could really help businesses reopen safely without worrying about any sort of negligence on their part. So that's what Aegis is in a nutshell. So we conducted a bunch of interviews with small business owners, and we realized that most of them are really struggling with certain important questions, like how many people do I have in my store today? How many of them are wearing masks correctly? How many of them are observing social distancing rules? And what happens is, if these questions are not answered, it becomes extremely difficult for a business owner to keep his business facility safe from any sort of COVID outbreaks. So what we did is we tried to create a complete turnkey solution, which is a combination of a camera hardware along with proprietary code written in Python that uses computer vision in real time to gather critical data points, such as people wearing masks correctly or not, people social distancing or not, or just the number of people in a facility. And then we, once these data points are tracked in real time, intelligent insights and reports are created, which makes it really easy for a business owner to understand and answer some of these questions, and also deploy then the necessary measures that they need to take. Say, for example, if there are more than 50 people in the store, the business owner can temporarily stop accepting new customers till some of the customers already inside have left the building. You'll see Trader Joe's doing a lot of this, but at the moment they do it with their staff. They don't have a certain tool in place to do some of these things. Some of the important features that we built into Aegis were inspired from what CDC recommends. These are just some guidelines which really help to prevent the spread of COVID. And these were really easily, sort of emulated with technology. So I'll let Bin and Jim really go into the deep dive technical details of how these features really work and how these filters really work. But just in a nutshell, these are three simple, important features: mask detection, social distancing, and just managing the number of people in a facility. I think these three features together can really help a business open safely, run their operations, focus on service without compromising on safety. Yeah, so our first test run with our MVP was done at MHub, and we did a month-long pilot with them, and we were able to, find out some interesting, intelligent insights, which we then built into the form of a dashboard, a daily report, which any sort of business owner can have a look and see and understand how many violations were done in a certain day, what are the different days of the week the violations are the maximum, what timelines during the day have the most number of violations, and accordingly, once you have such information at your disposal, you can then go ahead and put the countermeasures into place. I think this really makes the job of a small business owner really, really easy in a way. So that's it from me. I just wanted to set the mood and the tone for what Aegis is and what it does. I'll now hand it over to Binbin and Jim to take over some of the technical details of how this was created and how Python played a big, huge role in the birth of Aegis.
Sounds good. Thanks, Talish. Jim, your mic is muted. BTW.
Oh no, we still cannot hear you. Is your volume on the mic on? I still cannot hear you.
Okay. I think he's asking me for
All right,
to kind
yeah,
of take
go for
over and wing it. So I can talk a little bit more about the system design on a higher level. It's obviously going to be composed of software and hardware system. All of this is kind of built in-house for at least the well, not in-house, but we do use commercial off-the-shelf parts for the mechanical systems. We use the Jetson Nano for the board. We also self-select the exact sensors, power supplies, and additional mountings components to enclose the entire component. Okay.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, cool. Do you know what a Jetson Nano is, Ali?
I do not.
Well, let's start there. It's a super cool board. It's sort of like a Raspberry Pi with like superpowers. It has a deeper graphics chip, a GPU that you can use for image processing, and so that's why we chose it. Bingbin had to do a lot to just like adapt our code to work on that platform, so maybe he can talk about it a little bit.
Sure thing. The interface between well, the platforms between the Raspberry Pi and the Jetson Nano is a little bit different. The original code that we wrote for the Raspberry Pi required kind of building OpenCV and assortment of just dependencies that didn't work natively on the Jetson Nano. So we had to do a little bit additional special compiling just for that platform to do it. Yeah, that's about it. All I can remember for it.
Yeah, it was a pretty weird platform to develop. So we used OpenCV and some special image processing libraries, and basically they had to be compiled in a special secret way for Nvidia and their weirdo Jetson, like just board. And so, but we did it, and it was pretty cool. I think that was a big challenge for us, though. So like PyTorch is a great example of a Python library that basically does specific image-based machine learning recognition, right? But you can't just use PyTorch. You can't just install that like it's a project dependency. I mean, you have to have low-level processing. And so for us, that was the GPU on the Jetson Nano. And so we had to build OpenCV from scratch. And, it was pretty cool, but we did it. And, yeah, I think Ben was very much involved in sort of like dealing with those different dependencies.
Yeah, as with a lot of, when you're trying to port code over to different systems, whether it be from Windows to Macs or even Linux to, let's say, Arch to Ubuntu, you're going to run into a kind of set of differences in how they handle dependencies, libraries, and etc. So that was definitely one of the things that we encountered. A special kind of issue that deals with that permission and how we had to go around that. For example, in Linux or the Linux operating system that's comes standard with Raspberry Pi. I think it's the Raspbian. We can have full access over sudo using sudo on the USB interfaces. In the case of the Jetson Nano, we had to do something special, and we had to follow their specific guides, which didn't even work on first pass. So we had to actually go into a little bit more of their documentations and forums to figure that out. I don't want to belabor the audience with kind of the details like that yet. Maybe, Jim, you can give a explanation over the software subsystem.
Yeah, spot on. So, I mean, it was super weird to work with the Jetson Nano. And partly because as been said, it just like the documentation didn't convey appropriately what the tools actually did. And so, you can build OpenCV, or you can run software, image processing software on different computers, but for the Jetson Nano, they actually had special libraries. So, like this is a Python user group. One of the famous ones is PyTorch, right? And PyTorch is a lovely library that does sort of like neural network processing, and it's great. But you can't run PyTorch on a Jetson Nano, just by default. In fact, they have their own library. Nvidia has produced their own image processing library. We have to build and compile, and it was brutal, actually, to do all that. But we did it, and it worked very well. So I don't know if that got to everything that you were trying to point out, Ben, but...
Yeah, for sure. I think going into too deep in the details of that might be a little out of scope for the audience. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about the architecture and design of the software subsystem that we use for Aegis.
Yeah, I think Talish, maybe you have a slide for that? Or Talish, maybe you don't.
Jim, do you have like some color slides that you can share on your computer? I can get that going too, if that's easier.
Well, Talish is showing some slides. I just think he needs to show the right one. Closer, closer. We don't have this. Here, let me see if I can find it. I think I have one. Let me share screen over here. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we can. It's the chat window.
Yep. Cool. The funnest part is I have this new EDDX, which is a pretty kick-ass terminal program. But let's see. Oh, slowly loading. Hey, can you guys see this thing?
Yeah.
All right, so a lot of fun stuff here in Aegis, which is what we named the project. And I think what I wanted to show is there's a specific sort of like user diagram that I thought was very powerful. Okay, yes, there's a lot of
Hey, Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you have a terminal that's not like making noise when you type? It's sort of like getting a little bit of feedback.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Do you like my? You don't like my terminal?
I think the terminal looks great, but it's just a little loud for this kind of venue.
Oh yeah. Sorry about that. You can mute me. Here. Let's see. I'll hold off on this.
All right, so I think he just. I'm not sure what's going on. I think he left the
All right. Well, I guess I can talk a little bit more about how our project really relates to Python. Let's talk about the selection of Python as our primary language for firmware, which is kind of uncommon, especially in the firmware world where usually the resources and etc. are extremely limited. So C is usually the go-to language for the speed of it. But Python does have one thing going for it, which is accessibility. The nature of Python and the extensibility of Python of pulling in outside plugins or libraries makes it a very attractive option for prototyping. As a result, if we have a project, for example, Aegis, which has quite a tight timeline, and it's kind of topical in that it's made while the pandemic is happening, and to capitalize on the timing of the pandemic, we chose to pick Python just because it gets the development team up to speed really quickly. The development team was also composed of several interns and new developers that we were training that were from right out of university or were trying to learn to become professional developers. And that's why we kind of picked Python. After we started working with it, we came to a very quick realization that the ability to use OpenCV and the existing examples and code that's been written for OpenCV processing or image processing or filtering is a huge add-on to our project and our timelines. So that was a huge benefit that we found out as we were using Python, and obviously we stuck with it. And the reason for that is because the amount of resources that we would need to convert this to a C or C++ project is extremely high. Not to mention that Python actually is abstracting and using C and C++ on the harder image processing side. For example, OpenCV is actually a C++ program that we had to compile specifically for the Jetson. Meanwhile, we're using Python to facilitate and kind of define the interactions between how we convert and process that data afterwards. So that is another huge aspect of why Python is really great for it. The outside of just the image processing, we actually use Python for interfaces too. So a component of the interfaces was built under the web technologies, I think Flask. And so we also were able to kind of leverage the already existing community and knowledge base in that, as opposed to writing or modifying a C-based or C++-based framework to kind of show the UI of Aegis on the Jetson. So that's another aspect that we really appreciate about Python. Outside of that, I think that's all I can think of off the top of my head. Does Talish have more slides that you can really show about the system design and architecture that I might be able to kind of walk through and explain?
Bring up some slides.
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah. Right here, let's see. Okay. Yes, I believe you've seen this one.
Yep. So this is a pretty standard architecture of how we designed the feedback loop for our models. We built the initial model, we run through testing, evaluate, and then we run back to continuously improve upon the model. One important aspect of, I guess, AI or model training is the idea that the code is never really at a finished state, and neither is the model. Depending on the situation that the model is trying to or live in or solve in, it requires a new set of parameters that we have to retrain for. And this is really great for really picking a Python, because it really allows us to speed up that process of saying, well, this didn't work or that didn't work. Let's tweak it and let's go back and rebuild the model, or we tweak some logic within the program for us to go back to training again. So speed, even though it's not speed in terms of how fast we're digesting data and spitting out data, it's the ability for the developers to kind of express their logic and how we want that data or etc. to be composed of or ordered. And that's a huge aspect of Python that we really appreciate and leverage into. Can we have the next slide, please?
Yep.
This is a more detailed idea of how look into how we kind of process and really move the data around in our system. I think there was a very famous developer. I'm sorry for misquoting this person, so I'm not going to even try. But a very famous developer once said that it's the all programming is really the how we move data from one place to another. And it's really true for our agent system in particular. In terms of data gathering, we use Python to define the logic, but we leverage C or C++ via OpenCV to move the data to actually collect the data from the cameras. After
Sorry.
Yep. And after we have the data, we do some pre-processing, and that's also in Python. After we prepare the data, we're able to apply machine learning algorithms, which is why Jim was talking a lot more about the machine learning algorithms in PyTorch. So that was also built using Python. After that, we were able to kind of go through the model training cycle and test it. Once we got to a acceptable model, we were able to kind of deploy it. Obviously, to understand what is a good model, we had a ground truth kind of functionality in, and once we get to that stage, I think it's interesting to kind of talk about what that really means. And the big factor of that is to understand that with AI, if we were to say that a model is good or better than random, an important idea is to understand that what is the how do we quantify random, and basically it's saying that if you flip a coin and you're trying to write a bot to determine what it will land on, the percentage that your guess will be right is about 50%, and that's complete random. So if you want a model that is successful or that is actually better than random, it basically just has to exceed 50%. So the ground truth is us saying we have like a collected set of data that ourselves ran through and collect, and checking just ourselves by random if this is a person or not, or if this object is of interest or not, and running our model and saying, is this model better than us just randomly picking these aspects or objects to be objects of interest or not? So, and after we deployed, we're able to leverage a couple. We actually leverage kind of filters on top of OpenCV to add in like counters or face masks, though it's not necessarily image processing anymore. That relies on the model. Next slide, please. Yeah, I guess this is kind of what I recently explained.
Yeah.
Yep. And this goes into more detail about the software live system. This gives us a little bit more, a better idea of how the data is actually moving or looping through our system. We have a couple of hardware inputs in terms of cameras that sends the data via streams to our I guess software the agent system to kind of apply these filters to process these streams, go into the filters of motion detect and face mask. We do use a couple of additional sharpen and vertical horizontal flips, and then all that feeds back into or streams back into like a web API or via Flask to kind of show it for everyone else or a standard user. Next slide, please. And this is the hardware subsystem. We're built on top of the Nano board, but we're using a significant amount of custom parts to kind of make the subsystem, the entire composed of the subsystem, and leverage the Nano board. We get off-the-shelf cameras, and one that has to be supported for the Nano, and I think it was the Logitech C720. We have to customize the power distribution because the power that's coming in from like a standard outlet isn't necessarily the power requirements for the board. And once we get that wrong, we run into a lightning symbol on the Raspberry Pi, or in the case of the Nano, we just experience a significantly reduced performance in terms of processing speed. And then we also need a additional Wi-Fi module to kind of leverage the fact that we're outputting like a web interface for people on this local network to access. Next slide, please. No, that's not necessary. We can also continue to skip the mechanical systems. It's probably not of interest for ChiPy. All right. Yeah, I guess that's really it for the Aegis system on a higher level from at this point. I would love to open this up and see if there are kind of questions on the comments that people are.
Yeah, if folks have questions, please ask them in the chat. One of the questions I have right now is like, what is sort of the success rate of seeing somebody with a mask and identifying them with wearing a mask?
Yeah. Well, the identification system is really more about identifying objects of interest. Within the objects of interest, I don't know if you're familiar with LOL v4. It's a filter built on Python that we leverage to kind of identify objects in general. And in that, we have an open source filter to kind of identify facial masks that we can leverage to kind of identify if it's a mask or not. So it goes through a open source library. I think it was LOLv4, and then from that, after it detects like objects of interest, it goes through another filter, also supported by the open source developer, on identifying if that object of interest is a face mask or not. And we use that to continuously build and improve upon it for our use cases of where our system will live, to see if that object of interest is actually a face mask or not, to identify if it's a face mask.
Okay, cool. And you were saying that this is deployed at mHub. Is it functioning right now?
No, we took it down for testing and analysis.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Are there plans to put this platform somewhere else to help like businesses identify folks that are wearing a mask or not?
Yes, absolutely. So we have several target markets in mind for our next pilot runs. We're looking at nursery homes because these are some of the areas where there is a huge requirement for a system like Aegis, because the spread of COVID in these facilities is really, really high. So they could definitely make use of a technology like this. Then we're also looking at, say, certain grocery stores, university retail stores, university classrooms, and other things like that. So I'm, having conversations with UIC. I'm having conversations with several other small businesses as well.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other applications of this? Like, I know this pipeline has been built out to recognize objects. Are you thinking about any sort of other applications of this platform?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, there are some there are some features that we've thought of that we want to add in the coming future, given the success of Aegis right now and the funds that come in. So one particular feature that I'm very excited about personally is called hotspot detection. Subconsciously start moving surfaces. When we are around in a place, like you just touched this glass, like, and most often will forget to clean those surfaces at a given time, and you might just forget about it. And so one thing that Aegis will do is kind of identify certain hotspots in a given area, what surfaces are being touched, how frequently they are being touched, and automatically give recommendations that, okay, this surface is a high hotspot zone. It requires immediate attention. So, certain features. Then temperature checks is another one that we're very excited about.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for all my questions. Are there sort of any sort of things that you want to like highlight, or places people can go to find out more information?
Yes, we have our website, and we have a page built out for Aegis. It's called gather.co/Aegis. You can go out there and check out. If you want any information, you can directly reach out to me. I'm Talish, and I'm happy to have you as pilot partners if the need arises. And we'll do it for free because we want to learn and understand how Aegis really can be helpful.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to put links to the links that you mentioned to the website in the chat, as well as in the YouTube comments down below. So if you are watching it, you'll find that information later. We did have a question from Scott Larson. What was the package that you mentioned for mask detection? Or was it like a framework? It was like LOL or LIL4 v4.
Yeah, I forgot the exact name because I've been away for a year on this project. I will have to get back to you on that. I will post it in a second, though.
Awesome. Yeah, and Scott, we will get that information. If not tonight, check the comments from YouTube later, probably tomorrow. All right, well, that's it for the folks at Ecta. Can we please give them a round of applause for this fantastic tool that helps us stay safe by making sure that we're all wearing masks, because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to also post this post the emojis in the chat. All right, well, thanks, folks, for joining us, and we'll see you all later.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
for having us.
All right, so that was the folks at Ecta talking about Aegis, which is a hardware device and a pipeline they built out that helps object detection specifically for if folks are wearing masks, which is really important during these trying times, as everybody says. So that's it for us. Before we close out, I'm just going to share my screen so we can direct you all to the after party. All right, so before we do that, I don't have anything in order. Apologies for that. So we do have one last event, our last event of 2020. It's going to be the Python lunch break, which is going to happen this coming Wednesday, December 16th at 12 o'clock Chicago time. And it's going to be on this fantastic library called Schema Thesis. And this library allows you to do property-based testing of OpenAPI schemas. So you can find out how your API is functioning and make sure you capture all those edge cases for the inputs that are valid and inputs that are not valid. And we actually have the creator of the library, Dimitri Daigalo, giving this talk. So very excited about that and having him show us how to use his library. So do want to direct everybody to the after party. We're going to be meeting on ChiPy.town. This is our gather space where you can sort of go around and talk with folks in our community in an environment that has collaboration as well as proximity-based audio. So you can gather in groups and only talk amongst those groups. It's a pretty awesome platform. So that's pretty much it for us. If you're still here and you had a good time, go down below and give this video a like. It really helps us out. I'm actually not sure if it helps us out, but I hear a lot of YouTubers say it, so let's just go with it. Can we also just get one more round of applause for our fantastic speakers for tonight? All right. We don't have a question tonight. We don't have that either. You know what? There you go. All right. So that's it for us. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.